Hey there, Metal Rules viewers, I'm James Delbridge, and I am the lead singer and guitar player of Canadian power metal band, Lycanthro. So what drives me to create music is because music has been such a huge part of my life since a very young age. I started playing music when I was 7 years old, when I got my first guitar, and there's so many bands and artists over the years that have influenced me, not just musically, but personally as well. And there's lots of different elements that I want to add to my own music that has been very important to me. Like, for example, I want to write in the future some more like uplifting songs, like bands like Triumph that are more like motivational and personal. Or, for another example, I want to write like a concept album, sort of like Queensryche or Dream Theater, you know? There's so many things that captivated me as a young listener that I want to add and kind of into like a sort of our identity as a band. That's what I want to do, is I want to incorporate all of those elements into something that we can create our own identity with. So that's actually a really interesting story. So the band that I was in high school before Lycanthro was called Death Wish, and when that band broke up and I would form the band that would eventually become Lycanthro, we kept the name Death Wish for the first few months or so. And I was in college at the time, and near my bus stop where I would take to go to college, there was a record store in the area, and if I had a long wait, I would go look around the record store. And I was flipping through the metal section one day, and I found this album, and it was called At the Edge of Damnation. And it was by a British band that was also called Death Wish. So I immediately bought it, and I called up the guys and I said, hey, I found this in a local Ottawa record store. We need to change the name. So I wanted to have a name that had to do something with wolves or werewolves, because I've always had a big affinity for wolves, and I've always loved werewolf films. And I'd seen that a lot of the other bands I liked were doing kind of the vampire thing. So I thought, why not do the same thing, but with the werewolf mythos? And so we went through a bunch of different names, and one thing that we wanted to do that was a bit of a tall order was we wanted to have a name that no other band in the world has. And I think we were able to find one. So I found the name Lycanthro, and I found, okay, there's already a bunch of bands called Lycanthro. What if I take the P-E off, and Lycanthro was born? And I thought, yeah, that has a really great ring to it. So that's how the name came to be. Well, it's our first full-length album. It's 8 tracks. It's coming out June 4th on Alone Records. And the main thing that we want to say about this album is that it's a very diverse album. You know, one thing that we always strive to do as a band is we strive to never write the same song twice. Even though every song on this album falls under the umbrella of power metal, we want the listener to have a very diverse and varied experience, so metalheads from all walks of life will enjoy it, and I think that we pulled that off on this album. So the lyrics on this album come from a bunch of different places, mainly from a lot of the media that we love, like books, movies, video games, TV shows. For example, the title tracks Mark of the Wolf and Ride the Dragon are based on the video game Skyrim, which we're big fans of, and that game has tons and tons of things that can be turned into metal songs, and we did that obviously here. On another side of that, there's also songs like Crucible and Fallen Angel's Prayer, which is based on classic literature, like Crucible being based on, well, The Crucible, and Fallen Angel's Prayer being based on Hunchback of Notre Dame. And even there's one song on here that's based on an anime. One of my favorite shows of all time is Neon Genesis Evangelion, which the song Evangelion is based on. So a lot of the lyrics on this album really just center around a lot of the forms of media that we love, and kind of just to pay tribute and to kind of base these songs off them. Sort of like, you know, how you'd make a movie based on a book. That's kind of the way I see it in terms of adapting these songs and adapting these stories. So the album art was done by an Italian artist. His name is Lyrical Inspiration, and I got familiar with his work because I kept seeing it with a lot of the big underground bands like Riot V and Enforcer and Iron Angel and Mystic, and I really liked his art style. I loved the attention to detail in it. So normally when I have art for one of our albums, I'll usually do a really rough sketch, and I'm no artist, but I usually do a rough sketch and I give it to the actual artist and I say, hey, here's what I want, make it better. So I went to Vilio, and all I had was a sketch of a werewolf with his hand with the mark of the wolf burned into the skin. So I said, okay, do this, and add whatever you want to add. And he did such an amazing job, and he added so many little details I never would have thought of myself. Like, for example, the wolf is in this sort of mountain path, and on one side behind him there's a trail, and on another side there's a waterfall, and the Mark of the Wolf itself is in the sky behind him. It's a really cool album art, and I really like what he did with it, because as I said, he did lots of things with it that I couldn't have imagined, so I highly recommend him to anybody looking to get album art done. In terms of this year, there's two that I could say. The first one I'll say is Witherfall, The Curse of Autumn. Witherfall are one of my current favorite newer bands, and The Curse of Autumn is probably their best album that they've put out so far. It's all killer, no filler, every track's amazing, and there's lots of different influences there, from Dream Theater to Crimson Glory, everything in between, and they're all stellar musicians, and they're all amazing at what they do, and those guys I think are going to become big in the future. And on the other hand, I could also say Magnus Carlsen's Heart Healer. Now, for those of you who may not know, Magnus Carlsen is the lead guitar player of Primal Fear, and he has a million other side projects, and this is probably one of his best ones, where he did this epic rock concept album with a bunch of different guest singers that were all women, and he had some amazing singers on there, like Annette Olsen from Nightwish, Adrian Cowan from Seven Spires, Nora Lahimo from Battle Beast, and it was such an epic and well-made album, and all the singing performances were incredible. So those are the two albums I'd recommend from what I've heard recently: Witherfall, Curse of Autumn, and Magnus Carlsen's Heart Healer. So the music scene here in Ottawa is a lot more tight-knit than some of the other bigger cities like Montreal or Toronto. Even though that the genre pool here isn't as diverse than in those cities, all of us, all the metal bands here, we're all good friends, we're all good buddies, we all support each other and come out to each other's shows, and there's a real sense of community with our scene here, and, you know, not even just with the bands, but with a lot of the fans. A lot of the same people will come to all the shows and support all the bands, and because of that tight-knit community, we've had the opportunity to have a lot of bigger touring bands come through here, like Hammerfall, Unleash the Archers, you know, all these big names, just because the community here is so strong that it lends to a lot of these bigger bands noticing and being like, hey, this community is great, everyone comes out to the shows. Maybe if it's in a smaller venue, sure, but, you know, they always have a good time, and we always have a good time. So I find that the scene here is great, because there's also no ego, there's no rivalries. So yeah, I'm very proud of the scene here, and I'm very proud of all the bands in the scene, and everyone's just all amazing here. So in terms of the future of the band, we're definitely going to focus on touring once we're able to again. We want to pick up where we left off, because before the pandemic hit, we were actually supposed to go on our very first tour up to play the Hyperspace Metal Festival in Vancouver, BC. And we were going to hit a bunch of cities on the way, but obviously COVID derailed that. So we really want to focus on getting that experience under our belt and being able to go out there and meet lots of new bands and lots of new people. And in terms of new music, we actually have a new EP that we wrote fully during the quarantine, and we're hoping to go into the studio around fall to record that. We're already working on demos now, and in terms of a second album, we already have that half written because we've had all this time on our hands. And yeah, and I can't wait for people to hear the new songs. It's very different from what you're going to hear on Mark of the Wolf, but it still sounds like Lycanthro. As I said, we always try and be diverse, and I think people are going to hear that. We can't wait for people to hear our new stuff. So the reason why I think metal rules is mainly because of the community. You know, you'll see all different kinds of people from all walks of life in metal, and I find that the best part about it is that as long as you have an appreciation for the music, it's a very accepting community no matter who you are, where you're from, and, you know, there's a very big sense of camaraderie in there, and, you know, in most cases, everybody in the scene's friends, and, you know, you go to places like festivals and shows out of town where you'll make new friends, and the reason I love it is just this one big happy metal family, you know, and that's something that you don't really see with a lot of genres of music, and that's what I love the most about metal, and that's why I think metal rules. Anyways, thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Metal rules, and stay metal, my friends.